Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This lecture is for BBA 8. The subject is International Business and Trade. This is our lecture number 15, in which we will discuss our second chapter, which is National Differences in Political Economy. What is a political economy? A political economy of a nation. How the political, economic, and legal systems of a country are interdependent. They interact and influence each other, and how they affect the level of economic well-being in the nation. Moving forward, now we need to understand how the political system of the countries differ. Political system has two dimensions: the degree of collectivism versus individualism, and the degree of democracy versus totalitarianism. These dimensions are interrelated. Systems that emphasize collectivism tend towards totalitarianism, while systems that place a high value of individualism tends to be democratic. However, a large gray area exists in the middle. It is possible to have democratic societies that emphasize a mix of collectivism and individualism. Similarly, it is possible to have totalitarian societies that are not collectivist. The opening case, the Polish surprise, explores how Poland has successfully weathered the recent global financial and economic crisis. After decades of communist rule, the country embraced democracy and market-based economic ideals. In addition, Poland implemented privatization policies and welcomed foreign direct investment. Now, what is collectivism? Collectivism refers to a political system that stresses the primacy of collective goals over individual goals. The needs of society as a whole are generally viewed as being more important than individual freedoms. In such circumstances, an individual's right to do something may be restricted on grounds that it runs counter to the good of society or to the common good. How does modern day socialism look? In the early 20th century, socialism split into two: communism and social democrats. What is communism? Socialism can only be achieved through violent revolution and totalitarian dictatorship. Entreat worldwide by mid-1990s. Social democrats. Socialism is achieved through democratic means, retreating as many countries move towards free economic and state-owned enterprises have been privatized. Now, what is individualism? Individualism refers to the philosophy that an individual should have freedom in his own economic and political pursuits. Country focus. Chavez Venezuela explores the political and economic situation in Venezuela since the election of Hugo Chavez as president in 1998. Chavez, who ran a platform against corruption and economic mismanagement, faced a country in recession. His strategy involved drafting a new constitution that keeps him in power until 2013 and reconfiguring the Supreme Court. As a result, Venezuela is now considered to be only part partly free. Today, unemployment remains high and poverty continues to rise. Corruption is rampant and there is move to privatize certain industries, with the oil industry being a particular target. Moving forward, what is democracy? Democracy is originally practiced by several city-states in ancient Greece. Is based on a belief that citizens should be directly involved in decision making. Most modern democratic states practice representative democracy in which citizens periodically elect individuals to represent them. These elected representatives then form a government whose function is to make decisions on the behalf of the electorate. And it is assumed that if elected representatives fails to perform this job adequately, they will be recalled, impeached, or voted down at the next election. Now, what is totalitarianism? Totalitarianism is a form of government in which one person or a political party exercises absolute control over the overall spheres of human life, and opposing political parties are prohibited. Means communist, theoretic, tribal, right wing. Totalitarianism denies its citizens all of the constitutional guarantees asserted by representative democracies. There are four major forms of totalitarianism exist today. Number one is communist totalitarianism. Number two is theocratic totalitarianism. Number three is tribal totalitarianism. And number four is right-wing totalitarianism. Number one, communist totalitarianism, found in the states where the Communist Party monopolizes power. Number two, theoretic totalitarianism, found in the states where political power is monopolized by a party, group, or individual that governs according to the religion principles. Number three is tribal totalitarianism, found in the states where a political party that represents the interest of the particular tribe monopolizes power. And the number four is right-wing totalitarianism, permits some individual economic freedom but restricts individual political freedom. Now, what is the link between the political ideology and the economic system? The democratic totalitarian dimensions is not independent of collectivism, individualism dimensions. Democracy and individualism go hand in hand, as do the communist version of collectivism and totalitarianism. However, gray areas exist. It is possible to have a democratic state where collective values predominate, and it is possible to have a totalitarian state that is hostile to collectivism and in which some degree of individualism, particularly in the economic sphere, is encouraged. For example, China has been a move toward greater individual freedom in economic sphere, but the government is still a totalitarian dictatorship. What is an economic system? There are three types of economic systems. Number one is market economies. A market economy is an economy in which all productive activities are privately owned as opposed to being owned by the state. Production is determined by the interaction of supply and demand and signaled to producers through the price system. For a market to work in this manner, there must be no restriction on supply. A restriction on supply occurs when a market is monopolized by a single firm. In such circumstances, rather than increase output in response to increased demand, a monopolist might restrict output and let price rises. Second one is command economy. Now, what is command economy? A command economy is an economy in which goods and services that a country produces, the quality in which they are produced, and the prices at which they are sold are all planned by the government. Consistent with the collectivist ideology, the objective of command economy is for government to allocate resources for the good of the society. In addition, in a pure command economy, all businesses are state-owned. Number third is mixed economies. Now, what is mixed economies? A mixed economy is an economy in which certain sectors of the economy are left to private ownership and free market mechanism, while the other sectors have significant state ownership and government planning. India has a mixed economy. Mixed economies were once very common throughout much of the world, although they are becoming much less so. There was a time not too long ago when Great Britain, France, and Sweden were mixed economies, but extensive privatization has reduced state ownership of the business in all three. Now, let us understand that how the legal system of country differs. Legal system are the system of the rules or laws that regulate behavior along with the process by which the laws are enforced and through which redress of grievances is obtained. The legal system of a country is immense importance of international business. A country's laws regulate business practice, define the manner in which business transactions are to be executed, and set down the rights and obligations of those involved in business transactions. What are the different legal systems? There are three main types of legal systems or legal traditions in use around the world. Number one is common law, number two is civil law, and number third is theocratic law. Common law evolved in England over thousands of years. It is now found in the Great Britain. Former colonies include the United States. Common law is based on tradition, precedent, and custom. When law courts interpret common law, they do so with regard to these characteristics. This gives a common law system a degree of flexibility that other systems lack because it allows the judge to interpret the law. Second is civil law. Civil law is based on a very detailed set of law organized into codes. When law courts interpret civil law, they do so with regard to these codes. Over 80 countries, including Germany, France, Japan, and Russia, operate with the civil law system. A civil law system tends to be less adversarial than a common law system, since the judges rely upon detailed legal codes rather than the tradition, precedent, and the custom which they interpret. Judges under a civil law system have less flexibility than those under a common law system. Number third is theocratic law. Theocratic law is based on religion teaching. Islamic law is most widely practiced theoretic legal system is the modern world, although usage of both Hindu and Jewish law persisted into the 20th century. Now, how are the contracts enforced in different legal systems? A contract is a document that specifies the condition under which an exchange is to occur and details the right and the obligations of the parties involved. A contract law is the body of the law that governs contract enforcement. The parties to an agreement normally resort to contract law when one party feels the other has violated either the letter of the spirit of an agreement. Since common law tends to be relatively ill-specified, contracts drafted under a control law framework tend to be very detailed with all contingencies spelled out. In civil law systems, contracts tend to be much shorter and less specific because many of the issues typically covered in a common law contract are already covered in a civil law. This suggests that it is more expensive to draw up contracts in common law jurisdiction and that resolving contract disputes can be a very adversarial process in common law system. Now, which country's law should apply in a contract dispute? The United Nations Convention on Contract for the International Sale of Goods establishes a uniform set of rules governing certain aspects of making and performance of everyday commercial contracts between buyer and the sellers who have their places of businesses in different nations. Ratified by the US and about 70 countries, but many larger trading nations, including Japan and the UK, have not agreed to the provisions of contracts for international sales of goods and opt for arbitration instead. How are the property rights and corruption related? Property rights refer to the resource over which an individual or a business holds a legal title, that is, a resource that they own. Resources include land, building, equipment, capital, mineral rights, businesses, and intellectual property, such as patents, copyrights, and trademarks. Countries differ significantly in the extent to which their legal system protects property rights. Now, how are property rights and corruption related? Countries differ significantly in the extent to which their legal system protects property rights. These rights can be violated through private or public actions. Private actions refer to the theft, piracy, blackmail, and the like by private individuals or groups. Public actions violations occur when public officials such as politicians and government bureaucrats extort income and resources from property holders. This can be done through a number of legal mechanisms such as levying excessive taxation, requiring expensive licenses or permits from property holders, or taking assets into the state ownership without compensating the owner, or through legal means, corruption, by demanding bribes from businesses in return to the rights to operate in a country, industry, or location. How are property rights and corruption related? Again, in the United States, the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act was passed during the 1970s following revelations that U.S. companies had bribed government officials in foreign countries in an attempt to win lucrative contracts. This law makes bribing a foreign government official in order to obtain or maintain business over which that foreign official in order to obtain maintain business over which the foreign official has authority, a violation of United States law, and requires all publicly traded companies to keep audit records. The Act allows facilitating or expediting payments, mean grease payments, to expedite or to secure the performance of the routine governmental action. The rationale for this exception is that grease payments are distinguishable from bribes used to obtain or maintain businesses, since they merely facilitate performance of duties that the recipients are already obliged to perform. Now, which countries are more corrupt? Country focuses on corruption in Nigeria, describes that the corruption that has characterized Nigeria's economy over the last 40 years. When the country initially gained its independence from Britain in 1960, expectations were high that Nigeria would become an economic heavyweight in Africa. With abundant natural resources and a large population, it seemed that the stage was set of success. However, despite earnings of more than $300 billion from oil sales during the period 1970 to 2000, the country still suffered from extreme poverty, illiteracy, and high debt. Several factors have been blamed for Nigeria's trouble, including political instability and corruption. How can intellectual property be protected? Management focus. Here is the example that Starbucks wins key trademark case in China. Focuses on intellectual property laws in China. When Starbucks entered China in 1999, the company was quickly challenged by the look-alike competitor Xingbake. Not only did the name Xingbake mimic the Starbucks name, but Xingbake's stores were virtual replicas of those operated by the Starbucks. In 2003, Starbucks sued Xingbake for the trademark violations. In 2006, Starbucks won its case and Xingbake was fined $62,000 in order to stop using its name. The case was seen as a breakthrough of sort, a signal that China was finally caving to pressure from other nations and the World Trade Organization to respect intellectual property rights. Today, Starbucks operate over 300 stores in China and expect to market become second only to the United States. Protection of the intellectual property rights differ from country to country. World Intellectual Property Organization and the Paris Convention for the Protection of Industrial Property. To avoid piracy, firms can stay away from countries where intellectual property laws are levied, file lawsuits, and lobby governments for international property rights agreements and enforcement. What is product safety and liability? Product safety laws set safety standards for products and manufacturing processes. And product liability involves holding a firm and its officers responsible for product safety standards. There are both civil and criminal product liability laws. Civil laws calls for payment and monetary damages. Criminal liability laws result in fines or imprisonment. Both civil and criminal liability laws are probably more extensive in the United States than in other countries. What is the product safety and the product liability important? As country differs in the product safety and liability, laws raise an important ethical issue for firms doing business abroad. That when product safety laws are tougher in firm's home country than in the foreign country, or when liability laws are more lax. Should a firm doing business in the foreign country follow the more relaxed local standards, or should it adhere to standards of its home country? How can managers determine a market's overall attractiveness? The overall attractiveness of a country as a potential market and or investment site for an international business depends on balancing the benefits, cost, and the risk associated with doing business in that country. Other things being equal, more attractive countries have democratic political institutions, market-based economies, and strong legal system that protect property rights and limit corruption. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.